What is going on, everybody, and welcome back to SEC at the Dark. And it is a very little thin crowd here tonight, but hey, we're here. We're going to keep the show rolling because that's what you guys want. And we've already got 9 people, now 11, who was patiently waiting on us. We was trying to, fit some stuff. Sorry about, we've as you see, spring storylines, coach combos. We talked about that last week. That didn't get changed. None of us really know how to change that. So apologies on up front, but what we're going to talk about tonight, guys, you guys are really going to be interested in. Mike, Boss Man, thank you guys for being here tonight. Boss Man, did you want to talk about a steer agency? I don't have a read for it, so if you want to bring talk about that for a minute.
Sure, yeah, no problem. So the steer agency is a public affairs and digital marketing agency. So they sponsor our show as well as the Biscuits and SEC live show. So if you guys need anything in terms of public affairs or digital marketing, they kind of marry the two together. So if you guys want to check them out, they're at thesteeragency.com. Again, that's thesteeragency.com. So go ahead and check them out. And thanks to them for sponsoring the show.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And thank you guys once again for being here. Thank you all for welcoming us into your homes on this Thursday night. I guess really we're going to start out with is, our topic tonight is crucial. These coaches must win now. And I brought it up in the chat, I think yesterday, the day before, when we was talking about, everybody's going to be gone and if we could even do a show. And Boss Man and Mike, you both said, yeah, I'll be available. I said, okay, well, we can run it. I can run it. We'll all talk about it. And I said, let's bring up the coaches who are on the hot seat. So, of course, there's several in the SEC for sure. But who is the most crucial coach on the hot seat, you think, this upcoming year, Mike?
I definitely think it's Billy Napier. Winning 8 games last year was good for him, but it didn't buy long-term stability. I've used the analogy with him to several people, and he could be what Neil Brown was last year. Brown was on the biggest hot seat in 23, won enough games to keep his job, then in 24 got fired. If Billy doesn't win enough games this year, he's gone. The long-term stability isn't there, and people are going to expect big things out of him, especially now that he has the QB of the future for them.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I think it is a must-win now, especially for Florida fans. They're not used to, being in a situation like this where they're only winning like 6, 7 games, 8 games a year. They're used to being fighting for an SEC championship, So this is definitely rocky territory for them. Boss Man, who do you think is your most crucial coach on the hot seat this year?
Well, I'll get into that here, and I got a question for you guys after this, but
yeah.
And because I think we'll go back to Napier. We were talking in the chat a little bit, and I think you guys were discussing potentially a retirement here at the end of next year. But I think Sam Pittman's right there with Billy Napier. And if Sam Pittman does retire, then okay, we understand what happened, right? It was like, okay, we'll give Sam another year. It gives us another year of buffer to kind of like figure out what coach we want to go after, get the money together to do it, knowing in the background that Sam Pittman's going to retire. But do we really know that? I don't know. He seems kind of defiant in terms of, there was talk about that this year. He's like, nope, not retiring. He was kind of a blip so far on the radar. And you got that 9-4 year in year 2. And then he kind of, has a fall off year. And then now I think this last year, it was 7-5.
7-6. Yeah. Well, they lost the bowl game, but yeah, 7-5 right now. Yeah.
So, for me, I'm kind of looking over at Sam Pittman. I agree with you, Mike, that Billy Napier is right up there, but I do think that you can argue that Sam Pittman is on the hottest of seats. Really, I would say that mostly because I'm looking at Florida's roster and looking at DJ Lagway. Like I keep talking about that guy on our Biscuits SEC live show. It's like if I'm a coach on the hot seat, right, going into this year, who is like the most excited or feels like they've got the most comfortable hot seat? To me, it's probably Billy Napier because he's got DJ Lagway, who could potentially be a generational talent when it's all said and done. At least he has that ceiling, and he's shown those flashes. Whereas Sam Pittman has, Taylor Green, and I'm not knocking Taylor Green necessarily, but I'm worried because of all the players that I lost to the portal, from Fayetteville, and all these players coming in, going to have to break in a lot of new guys. And there's others out there as well, like Hugh Freeze, right, at Auburn. So I'm excited about the guys we brought in. I'm excited about the talent level, which is going to be the highest that we've had at Auburn since I got there. But there's still a lot of unknowns, right? We're going to be breaking in another new quarterback at Jackson Arnold. Can those wide receivers on the outside step up? Will I decide to run the ball this year and utilize the players that I have on the field?
Mm-hmm.
So to me, it's Sam Pittman, just because of all those factors, has the hottest seat to start out. And then my question to you guys, just to speak to Billy Napier for a second, is what is next year Florida's schedule again is absolutely brutal, right? I think top two, if not one, I saw on like the ESPN FBI rankings in terms of schedules. So what does Billy Napier have to do next year in order to keep his job and keep pushing Florida forward?
Go ahead, Mike. I would say he's going to have to at least win 8 games. That's probably bare minimum.
See, I'm torn between. I think it's 8 would be the number I would set, but I think for him, there's context there that, say he wins 8, but they get their ass kicked by Florida State the last game of the year. Like there's context in him. Bad losses could hurt him more than, some good wins. And like, I think it varies, because in their mind, and I don't ever remember this happening, their 2 biggest rivals, Tennessee, Florida State, last 2 games of the year. He doesn't want to lose both of those games. I mean, that matters, and it will matter in public opinion, if he has the momentum going into a bowl game.
And I would imagine Florida State's going to be better than what they were last year. They
can't be worse.
They can't be worse.
Yeah.
I mean,
they improved at both coordinator jobs. I've written about this for Farrell a few times. So they brought in, obviously, Gus on offense, who, despite UCF's problems last year, he was the play caller, and they had the 14th best offense in the country. That's pretty good. They ran the ball. And then their D coordinator is going to be Tony White from Nebraska.
Yeah. And we'll see what Florida State's got, because they open up with Alabama this year.
They do.
Yeah. So we'll see a lot about both teams the very first week of the season. Talking about Florida's schedule, they've got LIU. Okay, that's a winnable game. I'm telling you, South Florida. As an Alabama fan, I've seen them the last couple of years. They are tough. I mean, they play hard. Yeah.
South Florida was worse last. They were even disappointing last year. Alex Golish was great year 1. Then they regressed last year. Brown didn't do great at QB, but I wouldn't expect them to stay down for too long.
Exactly. So that's a sneaky game. Or September 6th, the second game. Then you got at LSU, at Miami, Texas, and at A&M. Just boom, boom, boom. I mean, that's a rough stretch for Florida. They're going to have to at least go 2-2 in that stretch there, at least.
Yeah. And that's what's crazy, right? There, 3 of those 4 are on the road, and the one that's not on the road is number 2 Texas, who's a national title favorite.
Jeez.
And for them, the Georgia game in Jacksonville is a Gator home game this year, so you don't even get that.
Right. Yeah. After the brutal schedule there, Mississippi State's probably going to be a little bit better, but I still would probably say Florida's more talented than them at this point. But, I mean, Kentucky, they'll probably get a win there. But then Ole Miss, Tennessee, and Florida State, like Mike mentioned, in the year, my gosh, that's just a brutal stretch there.
It really is. And the interesting thing, too, like you're talking about, okay, like I'm just trying to find – where are the 8 wins? And there are so many toss-ups on that, because I agree with you guys. I think 8 wins is the threshold. You got to hit 8. Like, if we're not hitting 8, we're regressing. There might be some nuance there, right, where it's like, okay, you may be able to say, okay, if he goes 7-5, and there was 2 games, right, like Florida lost 2 games to top 10 teams by a combined score of 8 points.
Like,
right?
if they lose to Georgia close in Jacksonville, nobody's going to fault them there.
Right.
Right.
Okay. Texas kicks a field goal at the end of the game to beat Florida, and then they lose by a couple to 2 field goals to Georgia. Right. Okay. Then they're 7-5. They're making progress. Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, I guess we lost
Boss Man. That's choppy. Okay.
No, that's Boss Man.
And I think another thing to go along with that context there is, we talked about the 2 big rivalry games, Tennessee and Florida State. But if they're tanking it before then, does he get the hook during the season? It could happen.
Yeah. Very good chance.
I don't know. I would be surprised about that. The only reason I say I'd be surprised about that is because of what happened this year, right? To be honest with you, I thought that Billy Napier was going to be going after the A&M game, and Strickland held on for dear life, right? And then later in the year, we got to the Texas game, and they get their teeth kicked in, get their asses handed to them in Austin by, I don't know, it was like 49-0 at one point or whatever. And I thought after that game, he's gone. No doubt about it, right? And they held on, and hey, here we are, and Billy Napier's still here. So Scott Strickland, to me, has just shown that it could happen if it happens this way, where it's a president's decision, and they oust the AD and Billy Napier, by the Tennessee game, right? If they're not doing well, I could see that happening. But if Scott Strickland's the one still in the driver's seat there, I think he gives them to the end of the year just based on prior history.
Yeah, I agree. Hey, and Boss Man, you made the comment. Their X factor, of course, is DJ Lagway. I mean, he can do wonders this year for that Florida team. Biggest question mark for him is his health. Are they going to be able to keep him healthy? Because if he goes down, I don't know what you do offensively if you lose a quarterback like that.
Yeah, he might have the most upside of any QB in the country. Am I wrong in saying that? I mean, I feel like he could.
Yeah, I agree.
Their backup, by the way, this year is Harrison Bailey, who was uber recruit like 6 years ago and is on his 4th college now. Was at Louisville, UNLV, been all over. Wow. He's the backup, so he's
Yeah. Well, hey, he probably is better than the backup they had last year, the kid from Yale who came in and had a rough go of it.
Yeah,
against Georgia, and then the subsequent
who was really the 3rd guy.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah, because Graham Mertz, he started out the year as QB and then got hurt, and then that's when we found out about DJ Lagway, and then Lagway got hurt. So it all depends on the health moving forward for DJ Lagway. If they can keep him healthy this year, I feel like they might be good enough to steal a win from a team you may think that, hey, I mean, they stole a win from Ole Miss last year, honestly, so they might be able to do that again.
I'm interested to see
setting up is almost because if they win 9 games with that schedule, they're probably a playoff team. But any less than maybe he gets fired. Like there's not a lot of middle ground there of making it, but not they're keeping his job and not making the playoffs. Yeah,
that's right. Boss Man, what was you going to say?
Oh, I was just trying to think. I haven't done my deep dive into the rosters yet. We're not to that point in the off season just yet. But I'm interested to know. Last year, in terms of the receiving corps, right? You had Elijah Badger, and then Eugene Wilson was in there. He only had about 20 catches, and then you had I can never say his name, Jameer DK.
Yep.
He had 42 catches for 700 yards. So you're going to have some guys step up next year for Florida to give DJ Lagway. I think DJ Lagway is one of those players, right, that, like I said, can be a generational talent. Mike, like you said, I think it's going to be hard to overhype this kid, really. He's that good. Yeah. So he's one of those players who can lift up the team around him, right, where, some guys need, for instance, a Carson Beck. Carson Beck needs dudes around him to really – he doesn't necessarily elevate, the play of everyone around him, whereas I think a DJ Lagway is someone who can do that. Now, that being said, it's still great to have as many weapons as possible around him, and I really don't know what all Florida is going to have. I know they had a couple wide receiver recruits, and they've got a kid.
One of their big portal ones was J. Michael Sturdivant, who was at UCLA and then Cal.
UCLA, yeah. So I don't, what was his stats last year? I don't know, but seems like it's going to be young, a mixture of young plus, the transfer that you mentioned.
My guess is his stats were not good because throwing the ball was not something they did effectively out there last year. So
true.
That's true.
But he was good at Cal the year before. He was their leading receiver by far.
Okay. So that'll be interesting. That'll be something to watch, right? Is how to Lagway and those receivers, which is going to be a lot of newness, a lot of young faces in that wide receiver room. How much they mesh, how well they're able to mesh, and how quickly they're able to mesh. Because, like we said, it's immediately the schedule is unforgiving, so they got to mesh pretty quickly in order to keep Billy Napier around and get to that 8-win mark that we've been talking about.
Yeah. I know also in the chat I brought up, and this question for you guys, Mike, you answered it in the chat, but where would you put Will Venables this year? I mean, is this almost like a must-win for him this year as well, or you think he might get another year?
Brent Venables.
Brent Venables. Oh, where I get Will Venables?
So
Brent Venables.
It's funny. I was thinking about Venables when Bossman was talking about Pittman because he mentioned that second year they went 9-4. Well, Venables has had 3 years. But he's only been good one of them the second year. They've only been in the SEC the 1 year. It was not good. If I was making my hot seat for the whole conference, I would probably put him second after Napier. But Pittman could be second too. I go back and forth between those two. But with Venables now, you're tied to bringing in Arbuckle as your O coordinator, and who brought Napier with him at QB, which I think was a home run move. Good fit there. But if that fails, you're the guy that's going to answer for that. They also brought in Jim Nagy as the new GM, who is going to oversee the roster and do a lot of that stuff. They're paying him $1 million a year to do that. They announced that a couple days ago. But just based on Oklahoma regressing and what they've done or not accomplished, I think Venables is up there, and their schedule is a gauntlet. They have Michigan out of conference at Temple. They'll win that. Kent State will still be the worst team. But then if you look at Oklahoma's SEC schedule, they don't play Auburn. They don't play Kentucky. They don't play Mississippi State, and they don't play Vandy. They're the four bottom teams probably. They don't play any of them. I mean, that's tough.
Yeah, that is rough. I mean, you open up with Texas, and then you go to William Bryce Stadium the next week and play South Carolina, and then after that, Ole Miss is waiting, and then back on the road to Tennessee for your off week. Good night. And then after your off week, Alabama's waiting.
That's interesting. So we're talking about the strength of schedule, and. Sorry, my internet's being a little slow here.
One thing I saw did have Oklahoma as the toughest strength of schedule in the country. One thing I saw had Oklahoma, South Carolina, and then Florida 1, 2, 3.
Okay.
I think that was the one I was just looking at. 247 was talking about that. I had Oklahoma 1, and then even go up a few, and it's LSU at number 6. So pretty ridiculous. It's gonna be tough, in Norman. And look, I'll be honest, I didn't watch any Wazoo football last year. It was hard to even, difficult to remember they even had a team because of the
they play at 10:30 at night too. Yeah.
And they play at 10:30. So I truthfully did not watch any Wazoo football last year. So everybody started talking about this Napier kid in the portal, and I was like, okay, well, we'll see, and looking at him, he seems like he potentially is another Baker Mayfield type, right? Like out of Texas, totally overlooked by the Texas schools, goes off to a different college. And is able to make a name for himself. And in the portal era, a little different, right? He goes far away and now he'll come home. But he's kind of in that Baker Mayfield mold, I would say. Mike, you could probably give us a little bit more background on him in terms of the style of play. But looking at his stats, that's kind of how it seems. So breaking in a new quarterback, though, right? Like we just did that last year with Jackson Arnold. Did not go well. Now we're breaking in a new quarterback. We're breaking in new coordinators. A lot of newness there in Oklahoma. Also, some turnover at wide receiver. Had a lot of issues at wide receiver last year. A lot of that due to injury. But then also the offensive line, right? The offensive line was a massive problem. Has been for the couple of years.
We've talked about that.
Right. Yeah, we were harping on that, right? And so, there's just a lot that needs to get done. And I totally agree with you, Mike. Like in terms of talking about who's at the top here, I might almost revise my thoughts, because Brent Venables is up there mostly because of the expectations of that program, right?
Right.
Oklahoma believes they're LSU, just as LSU believes they're Alabama, right? Like it's on that Ohio State upper echelon tier A of blue bloods in college football. And whereas Arkansas can't say that, right? Yeah. Arkansas is a very good football team, a good program, but I don't think even most of their fans would argue that they're on that tier A level, though they're trying to get there. So, yeah, there's Oklahoma's got to do a lot next year. I think they're on the same level, right? I think they got to hit 8 wins too in order for Brent Venables to stick around.
And you had mentioned the new coordinators. We talked about Arbuckle. I don't know if you guys saw this recently, but Venables said he will be the D coordinator this year for them.
Wow.
So that is the one thing they did. A move I like coaching wise. Nate Drilling, who was Utah State's interim head coach last year, he's going to be their inside linebackers coach, and I think top notch young coach. He's done a lot of good things. He had taken a D coordinator job. I forget where, but it was a G5 school, and then was there for like a week and a half, and then went to Oklahoma to be the inside linebackers coach. So that was another move they made, but yeah.
I was sitting here thinking when you guys were talking about all this, but the two programs we're talking about here, they're up there where their fans want them to be, up here at the upper echelon, and they're not there right now. Yeah. So that hot seat is screaming hot right now, because those guys want to be up there and in the playoff picture and SEC picture and everything. And really for Oklahoma, I think they want to prove that they belong in the SEC. Texas already done it, honestly. Oklahoma, they still have got to prove that, hey, we belong here just like everybody else does.
Definitely.
Great point. Yeah.
I'm going to try something here. 1 second.
I like
that. Better?
Yeah.
Perfect. We got our 3.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
I wasn't sure if that was going to block anybody's face, so I didn't change it. Hey, perfect. We're good.
I figured if we got 3, we might as well go big for everybody.
That's right. Yeah. We got 220 people. Thank you all for listening.
We were talking about Jackson Arnold. Is that a good segue into Auburn and Hugh Freeze's status?
That's a good segue.
I'm one. I don't know. I don't want to call it bullish, but I guess I don't think he's on the hot seat like a lot of people do. Because I look at it's weird. He's made a lot of mistakes at the QB position. Done pretty good at every other position. Like their roster looks like it's getting better. He's only going into year 3. I think a disaster of a season, he could get fired, but I don't put him on the same level as the other 3 guys we've talked about.
Why is that? Do you think it's just because, is it because the not that the expectations are lower, but he almost has lowered expectations since he's been at Auburn? Because
maybe, that's fair, but I think part of it is that it's only year 3. And he is a guy who has won everywhere else he's been. So I don't know that there's the urgency that they'll feel like this isn't the right guy. I think they'll look and see he's won elsewhere. He's turned over places that were down. And the roster is really good at a lot of positions.
I'll say this too about Hugh Freeze real quick, is that, I would disagree with you except for one thing, Mike, because they didn't give Brian Harsin that much time.
No,
they did.
But the difference is that Hugh Freeze is one of us.
Yes,
right? Hugh Freeze is a Southerner. Hugh Freeze is kind of from the area, right? He's from the footprint, and he talks like us, right? So, and he's won everywhere else, like you said. So Brian Harsin has won, but he won in one place. It was a mid-major, Boise State, one of the blue blood mid-majors, if you will, tier A. But Hugh Freeze is like us, and he's won in other places in the SEC. So
I had almost the same conversation with someone a couple of days ago, one of my buddies who's a Fantasy Life reporter, and I said that when Harsin had the thing with the intern, early on, that was fabricated. They weren't going to get him on that, but it told me one thing: the boosters were out to get him there, and he wasn't going to last. He was on number from that day. The writing was on the wall. We don't like you. We don't want you around.
Yeah.
one of the I mean, there are so many crazy things that have happened in the SEC, but that is maybe the craziest one is they made up a fake affair.
Yes.
To try to get this guy fired.
Yeah.
Man, that's.
I mean, and another school we just talked about rehired a guy that got in a motorcycle accident.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. SEC is kind of crazy with stories and things like that. But Hugh Freeze, I think they're going to give him at least this year. Now, if the results aren't there, then you might see that seat get a little bit warmer. But my brother-in-law, he's a huge Auburn fan, and he talks about constantly about he's recruiting Highway. Oh, that's great. But can he coach up those recruits in the future and get them there to that next step where they want to be? Because I mean, he's depending on how it goes this year, he's looking at 0-3 against Alabama to start his career at Auburn, and that says a lot about fans down there. They want to beat Alabama as bad as people don't want to say that. Alabama is where they're at. Yep. They want to beat Alabama. They want to be Alabama, and in order to be Alabama, you've got to beat them. If he's not beating them, then how long do they give him on a leash?
Well, and remember, they had a guy named Gus Malzahn who beat Nick Saban 3 times, and then 3 times. And and also
won 9 games.
Won 9 games a year, right? Mm-hmm. Won the SEC, went to a national title game. They ran that guy out of town, and the last thing they ran him out of town for was he's not recruiting at a good enough clip. Right. Yeah, so they don't have a lot of patience there in Auburn. And I totally, you being an Alabama fan, Jake, this well, but almost one of the worst things that you can have happen. And you look, as an Aggie, I kind of know this as well, right? You look especially to your rival, right? And if your rival is viewed as better than you, or is winning the championships and you're not, 9 wins a year is not going to cut it, right? We need to be winning national titles. We need to be winning 10 games a year. We got to be beating our rival at least 50% of the time. Mm-hmm. And Auburn has not been able to consistently do that since 2009 when Nick Saban came in.
Yeah. Right.
And maybe I'll revise my answer after September, because Auburn has a tricky opening schedule. They go to Baylor week 1. Baylor was a lot better last year than we thought.
Oh, yeah.
So going to Baylor's not a gimme. They have 2 G5 games that they'll win, but none of their fans are going to care if they win because they expect to win those. Then you go to Oklahoma and you go to A&M. If you're 2-3 or even 3-2 there, people are going to start to get the pitchforks out.
Yeah, because you still got a date with Diego Pavia coming up too, and we know how that's going to go.
You know what? The guys we're talking about, we have a week of Halloween. Auburn at Arkansas could be for somebody's job potentially.
Wow, that's something to keep you on.
I think it would need to go really bad for Freeze to be the case there.
You're right.
Yeah.
Hey, by the way, the week after that could also still be for somebody's job when you have Kentucky playing Auburn.
That's a very good point.
Yeah,
we ain't even got to Mark Stoops yet, but he's got to be up there as well.
He does, without a doubt.
Yeah, I'm curious with Stoops. Is it going to be if Kirk Ferentz retires, is Stoops going to go to the alma mater?
Yeah, that's a very good point. That's something I'm going to keep my eye on this year for sure.
Do you think Iowa wants him?
Maybe not after last year. I also
kind of worn off.
Yeah. I also think Kentucky's kind of doing him raw a little bit. They were a backwater nobody in football, and he's got them way better than they've been.
Yeah.
They were bad last year, but before that, you pretty much could set your watch to they were going to win 7-8 games and go to a bowl game, which not great by SEC standards. Very good by Kentucky historical standards, though.
Right. Yeah.
But double-digit win seasons, I believe, in his tenure. Is that right? One was vacated, but nobody cares about that.
Yes, you are correct. Yes.
Yeah.
But
that's crazy impressive.
We got short memories in this conference. Nobody's going to remember the wins, and I'm slowly getting on board that maybe it's time for you're our greatest coach ever, but see you later. It's time to move on, especially when Golden Boy John Summerall, the next guy, is doing great things.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Good point. Yeah, I was talking with Hammer about this a couple weeks ago. We did a show where we discussed in depth, the kind of who potentially is going to be on the hot seat, who's obviously on the hot seat, and then
I watched that show. Yeah, it was a good one.
Yeah. So we talked a lot about this, and that Mark Stoops, he's Kentucky's best coach in their history. He's done a great job. A lot of records, broke the Florida curse. Had them in the top 10. I think their highest ranking finish the season was 13 a couple of years ago. But at the same time, like in this business and in college sports really as a whole, there can come a time where there's very few coaches, right, who make it past a decade at any place. It's very, very rare. Yeah. And if you start getting into like year 8, year 9, year 10, especially if like things start to sour a little bit, if you're not making much more progress, if you kind of, get stale in your record or you start to backslide, the shtick can get very old and people start to, kind of stop listening to you. Maybe, hey, with the stuff that people were willing to put up with when you were winning, now if you're winning 7 games, if you're winning 6 games, if you go 4-8, people aren't willing to put up with that stuff anymore, and it starts to fall on deaf ears. And it just can start, the relationship can just start to wear out, as many relationships do. And it's just time for a fresh start and a new perspective. And I think we're getting close to that time in Lexington. And this year's going to tell us a lot if we're there or not. And I lean towards that's where we're at.
As a native Minnesotan, what you just described is what's going to happen with PJ Fleck in 5 to 8 years.
Yeah.
Like better than almost anybody they've had, winning 7, 8, every year. But at some point, that's not going to be enough. And the people that don't like him are going to say, roll the boat is gimmicky, and they'll want somebody else, and that's what'll happen.
Right. Yep.
It's one of those things too, where, doing a good job is almost a detriment to you eventually, right? Yeah. Because you raise the expectation level, and then that is the standard, which is a good thing. That's what you came to do. However, that is now the standard. And if you start falling below that, or you don't start meeting it or don't start exceeding it every year, you got problems on your hands. And, I know that very well, considering Kevin Sumlin, right? Yeah. 2012, he's got Johnny Manziel, right? Lightning in a bottle, like verge of a national title conversation. You've got Johnny Manziel, the greatest player in A&M history. Then you kind of backslide a little bit in year 2, and then you kind of have this total roller coaster, and you never even close to live up to those expectations from 2012.
Yeah, and you expect Jimbo to come in and have the Jameis Winston 2013 team all over again, and we're going to be winning titles at Kyle Field. And
10 wins a year minimum. Yeah. We're going to compete for the SEC title year in and year out because the standard he had at Florida State is the standard he will bring here.
Yeah,
never lived up to it.
Right. Yep. My question is, Mike, you brought up the historical aspect of things. When you have teams who historically win 8, 9 games, and that seems like that's their ceiling, having a coach that can get you to that is great. But if you want to take that next step, that's where they're going to, like Kentucky, under Stoops, they have won 8, 9 games. Now they want to get to that next step and win 10, 11 or so and possibly fight for a playoff berth. But in the SEC, it's just so tough for a coach to sustain life if he does not, win games, honestly. But it's so hard to win games in this conference because it's, as we all know, it is the most talented, gifted football conference in America.
Ole Miss wants the same thing. They've done. Lane's been better, but they didn't meet expectations last year. They disappointed in a lot of ways. And in a year or two, it might be this guy raised the boat, but he hasn't got us over the edge yet. Like, will this conversation happen with Ole Miss in a couple of years? I don't know, but it's a hypothetical, like Boss Man was talking about, that he raised the expectations, and getting to that point might not be good enough in 2028.
Here's a good segue here in terms of shtick as well as the expectation level being raised. Brian Kelly in Baton Rouge, year 1, right? Jaden Daniels, you go to the SEC championship, you beat Alabama, and then year 2, right? And now we're here. What were we, 8-4 last year with Nussmeier? So you got fans chanting "Fire Kelly" after during the Alabama game as they're getting their teeth kicked in this year against a Alabama team that frankly wasn't the best Alabama team that we've seen in a while.
No.
Had a lot of flaws, and they did that against the Crimson Tide. So I think this is a pivotal year for LSU and for Brian Kelly, and because same thing at Auburn, right? Like as many fan bases across this conference, LSU views themselves as the top of the cream of the crop in this conference, and they have the right to. They have.
It's odd we're saying that about a guy that's won 29 games in 3 years.
I know
it is.
The thing I tell everybody, most people forget how awful the LSU team he took over was. They had 35 roster guys and played a receiver at QB in a bowl game. Yeah. And it was, he had Daniels. No, he brought in Daniels. Daniels wasn't there before Brian Kelly.
That's right.
But certain things have went stagnant the last couple of years. Well, 2 years ago, they couldn't play defense at all. I mean, they were the year Daniels won the Heisman, they were so bad on D. And last year, really the first game of the year set the tone for them. Everybody was kind of out on them after they lost to USC in Vegas. And they had a pretty good, they won 9 games, but I think the feeling of that was after that loss, it's just another one of those years was probably the mindset a lot of their fans had.
You're going to see what, a lot about this LSU team, opening day with Clemson. That is going to be a slobber knock every game.
Yeah.
Yeah, that will be an interesting game. But also this touches on something we were talking about earlier. Brian, people are willing to overlook the things they don't like about you if you're winning.
Yep.
Right.
And Kelly, most people know this. Like he's not that likable. He may be a nice guy. I've never met the guy personally, right? But just the general feeling about the guy, even from Notre Dame fans. You talk to Notre Dame fans, they're like, "Thank God that guy's gone."
Which is odd because he is the winningest coach ever at the most historical program in America, and they hate him now.
They hate him.
I know.
They hate him. He's just kind of a jerk, He just kind of comes across that way.
Which was Jimbo's thing too. People just didn't. He graded people.
Yeah, totally.
Urban Meyer graded people. PJ Fleck grades people. I mean, it's
right.
We don't give the benefit of the doubt to guys that act or are like that, so to speak.
Yeah, that's true. Unless you're Urban Meyer and you're winning, right? If you're winning national titles, if you're going to the playoffs, hey, we'll overlook it. We're willing to look the other way on a lot of stuff, right? But if you're not meeting the standard, if you're not exceeding the standard, not making the playoffs at LSU, you're not going to the SEC title, not going to the national championship, then we're going to start to talk. And
fine line between Urban Meyer and Dana Holgerson.
Yes, that's right. So, and the other thing with Brian Kelly is that he's not a Southerner. He's not one of us like Hugh Freeze, right? Hugh Freeze might get a little bit of rope because he can talk the talk. He knows how to talk to us. He knows how, he knows how the whole game is, how the whole thing is in the South. Brian Kelly is not that way. He's a total carpetbagger. Everyone knows it. That was something that people were worried about when he came to Baton Rouge. I mean, I remember talking about it a lot when he came. Like, is he going to be able to do it down here? Is he going to be able to recruit down here?
Right.
It needs to be seen. And so that stuff will come. That will start to come back up because I don't think he's already liked by that fan base. Yeah. And the fact that he's not from here, he's not from Louisiana, he's not from the South. I think it could come back to bite him.
Yeah, that's one of them. Like in my writing, and when I eventually do a show here, like kind of my big focus is coaching carousel. I feel like with Kentucky, Arkansas, etc., I have a good beat on who they would hire. With LSU, I have no idea who they would hire. They would have the elites of the elites up for that coaching job.
Right.
I don't right now. No one jumps off the page to me that they would hire this guy. Certainly, they'd get a good hire, but yeah,
it's very interesting. I mean, look what they did at Orgeron. I mean, Orgeron won a national championship, and then the next year they fired him. I mean, it's insane. That fan base.
A lot of things were going wrong there too. I don't know if that was totally unwarranted or unwarranted at all would be the way. But
I think they were willing to look the other way on a lot of stuff, and then there was so much stuff that they could not look the other way.
Right.
Plus, they were losing. So
you bring up a good point though, boss man. To that, say they would part this year, next year. If they part ways with Kelly and it's bad, do they have to hire a Southerner? It might happen. You bring up a good point there.
But who? Like your point, Mike. Who though?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I mean,
unless it's a Nick Saban, right? Well, and
Yeah.
who is that right now? There is no Nick Saban out there that you.
If a guy I mentioned, we mentioned Baylor, they were struggling, but if they won 8 games last year, if Dave Aranda wins 10 games this year, do they bring him back? They loved him when he was D coordinator,
right?
Would that be a job that could convince Kiffin to go? They'd be foolish not to ask.
Kiffin was the name that came to mind.
A guy I've brought up before who it might have been you, Boss Man, who kind of wasn't as sold on him. If Mizzou wins 10 games again, Eli Drinkwitz could be in the mix for that job.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, you're right. I'm not totally sold on Drink. He's done a good job. I mean, I'm not hating on him. I just want to see it sustained.
Another one. Before we heard every year, will Gus leave? Gus leave. It finally happened. We hear that now about James Franklin. He could be an LSU candidate. He's an elite coach, and they're an elite program. It would make sense in a lot of ways. And he's a guy. He's a guy. They would overlook him not being a Southerner because of all the success he's had.
My question though would be, because of the perception, would the fan base revolt? I think James Franklin's a great coach and he's done a great job, but the perception nationally is that he can't win the big one. And, LSU wants to win the big one. And so I wonder if that fan base would be like, we just did this with Brian Kelly.
Yeah.
Right. We brought in this guy who wins 10 games a year. That's not what we want to do. We want to win national titles. Brian Kelly couldn't win the big one. James Franklin can't win the big one either.
He won 2 playoff games. Are we still on that shtick? I mean, people
true.
are going to say, well, it's Indiana, it was Boise. Yeah, he won 2 playoff games is how I look at it.
Yeah. I agree with that, too.
Yeah.
If I was an LSU fan and then that ended up going down, I would be pumped up about it. But I do.
You're right, though. You're right. The other one, as a Gamecock, it pains me to say this. Shane Beamer could be a guy one of these schools try to poach away. And if I'm him, you think long and hard about that. Yeah.
Shane Beamer, if he has another good year, he's going to be up there on some.
The one I worry about for him, where was he before he was with the Gamecocks? Oklahoma. That would make a lot of sense for them.
I would also be surprised if he did this. However, I think Virginia Tech is going to come open after next year.
Probably so.
He's going to get the call, right? Because if
you have to call
because of all the family ties there. So I don't think he goes to go in his dad's shadow. He's already kind of broken out of that.
Yeah.
At South Carolina. So I would be surprised, but it is, it's curious, right? That job probably going to be open.
Yeah. In every way other than the heartstrings, it's a step down. I mean,
you're
tough
right
to say someone would leave the SEC or Big Ten for that job now.
But just think about the storyline, right?
I know. Oh, yeah.
Beamer comes back and rebuilds Virginia Tech into a national power.
And if you talk about job security, no one in America would have a longer leash than Shane Beamer going to Virginia Tech. He would get an infinite amount of time to win games there.
Yeah, 10 years, man.
Yeah.
Frank Beamer gave us the best meme of all time when he was doing this, and it was 0-0 at the end of the fourth quarter. He was. I would never forget that. Never forget that.
Was it against? I'm blanking. Was it Pitt? Who was that game against?
It may have been Pitt.
Wake Forest.
Wake Forest.
That's right.
Yeah,
yes.
Wake Forest.
Because I knew it was a conference game. Yeah.
0-0 into the fourth quarter, and you're celebrating. Man, that's never forget that. But that's a very good point. But you think of any other coaches this year that may have a hot seat? I would think next year, and we talked about this last week. And I'm picking on Alabama here, but Kevin DeBoer, he may win 9 games. Mike, I think you said his threshold may be 9 games this year. How hot is that seat going to get? I'm one of the realest fans of Alabama sport, but everybody else, they're diehard. 9 wins, I'm fine with. I'm happy with that, especially with a new coach trying to get his system built up. But the diehards down there, if he don't win 10, 11 games this year, they are going to ride.
One guy here, Paul.
Yeah.
One guy I want to talk, I don't think he's on the hot seat, but Vandy has one good year. What if they revert back to normal Vandy this year? What? Yeah. And I think that's more realistic than them winning 9 or 10. that roster is just not that great. And
No.
we talk about Pavia a lot. Name one other skill player on that team. Most people couldn't. And I just don't see him keeping up the momentum. You know, Lee's good. Jerry Kill was a great addition. But if they revert back, how hot does that? I think Lee will get to 2026. I don't think he gets fired this year. But if they revert back to normal Vandy, how hot is that seat afterwards?
Yeah, the year after Pavia leaves is where it's going to be. Are they going to be able to sustain 6-7 wins like they have with Pavia? Or are they going to go back to the 2, 3, 4 win threshold?
Yeah.
I'm interested to see too if they're able to replicate it this year with Pavia. I know Pavia's a gamer, right? He's a baller, but hey, we got like 12 games of tape on this kid now, and there's going to be teams trying a lot of different stuff against them. We'll see if they're able to get back to that level that they were this year.
And with his style, he could get dinged up in the conference too. I mean, you look at weeks 2 and 3 at Virginia Tech, at South Carolina. That's a tough, first month of the season, and then you got a couple down games. So then you go to Alabama and play LSU back to back. That's tough.
And Alabama's going to be ready for him.
Bama's going to have that one circled right now.
Yeah. I guarantee they've watched film on that little shuffle pass that just killed us all game. They're going to be honed in on that the entire game. So,
and they're going to be hitting hard too. I mean, Pavia's going to take shots that game because they're going to want to let them know that last year was an aberration.
Right.
How about this name, Kirby Smart? I'm just kidding.
Oh yeah.
If he doesn't make the playoff again, we'll start talking about it.
If you don't win a national title, you're done.
But
I would actually probably see his name more in an NFL job than I would be on the hot seat.
I don't think he's ever leaving Georgia. But I do have another one aside from my joke here. Jeff Lebby. I know we're only going into year 2 here. I don't think he's necessarily on the hot seat.
He gets a 3. I think he gets a 3 no matter what.
I agree. But I know that state fans want to see progress, right? Like Mississippi State is now like their level, right? They believe that they're of the Dan Mullen era, right? Like, hey, we can get to 7, 8, 9 wins a year and have 1 year, right, where we have like a couple transcendent players like a Dak Prescott, right? And maybe have a top 15, top 10 year. And they haven't been anywhere close to that for a couple of years now. And year 1 of the Lebby era was rough.
Yeah.
I know they want to see a little bit of progress, and you got to win an SEC game or 2 this year.
They couldn't run the ball. Bringing in Fluff Bothwell from South Alabama was a good pickup for them because they needed that. They're another one, though. Their opening schedule, they play Southern Miss, who getting help from Marshall. They're going to be a lot better. Then you got Arizona State week 2, who made the playoffs last year. I mean, that's a tough game. And ASU's going to want to win that game after losing to them, fairly recently. I mean, that's going to be a big one for Arizona State. Then, when the conference season opens up, it's not much easier for the Bulldogs. You got Tennessee at A&M, at Florida, Texas at home.
Oof, jeez.
That's
brutal.
Yeah, I don't know how many wins I see for them this year. And the tough part is they're just like they were I think the team that had the most transfers out and then the most transfers in. So they're total roster turnover there in Starkville. I know they've got a bunch of players they're excited about, which is great, but they're there's a lot of teams like this now because of the portal era that when you bring all of those guys in, it's such an experiment.
It is.
And rarely I think it's like, it's a pretty minuscule percentage that really work out and have a great year. I'd have to go do some study on it. It'd be a really interesting thing to do. Maybe I'll have to do that for biscuits.sec.com.
Even the 2 coaches that have used it the most, though, like guys that have succeeded, Kiffin and Dion in Colorado, they both had a lot of guys that flopped too that were transferred. Your studs were portal guys. You had a lot of guys that didn't pan out.
Right.
Yeah. Yep. So it'll be interesting.
To me, this feels like a 4-8 team, and Lebby's on the hot seat in 2026.
Yeah.
Going into 2026. Yeah. For sure.
Yeah, I got this.
Because you got to beat Alcorn in Northern Illinois. you really want to beat Southern Miss, you probably have to. And then
Not Rick.
1 or 2 conference games. I mean, that I don't see many more wins there. Just looking at their talent-wise, they're just not on the level of a lot of these teams.
No. And we hyped up their QB last year and was like, when you need to build around this guy, and he just let him walk. Just let him walk.
How many times did I say that during the season?
I know.
Harping on it, like, please, God, just do whatever you got to do to keep Michael Van Buren.
Van Buren, yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And then he's going to be a backup at LSU.
I know.
And that's all because Levy couldn't help it but flirting with his old friend Jackson Arnold, and that was a huge mistake, man. You had the guy of the future, and I think he was going to stay if I had to guess, right? Like so, because it was almost immediate after the Jackson Arnold rumors came out.
For Van Buren, it was safe too. It's like, I'm going to be the guy here. Like I'm going to be an SEC starter come hell or high water, even if we're not great. Like, that's good.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. I like Kramenhoek. He was a top recruit. For Florida State, I think it was a tough loss. But then when he saw them bringing in Castellanos, well, I'm not going to stick around for this. Yeah.
Hey, speaking of that, I was thinking about that when we were talking about FSU and Florida earlier in the show. I'm interested in that. That to me, like Castellanos, he got benched at Boston College last year. He's had some good games, right? He's shown some flashes. So I'm interested to see how that works out at Florida State with him and Gus Malzahn. I think somebody a couple of weeks ago made the analogy to like Nick Marshall from the Auburn days.
Yeah.
I'm interested to see how Gus utilizes him. He seems like a Gus quarterback made in the lab, so maybe Gus can utilize him better than they did it.
Gus also brought in KJ Jefferson, and that didn't go too well last year.
That's true.
Yeah. So, but by and large, I got to trust Gus. Like, you feel like he knows his way around that position, but didn't last year because Jefferson didn't work out and they were rotating 2 guys and at risk. And then who was there was another one, but I don't remember.
Yeah. KJ Jefferson not working there last year really surprised me.
Yeah.
Him leaving Arkansas and going there, I was like, well, he's got a coach that coaches up quarterbacks really well. And then it just flopped on him. But Malzahn, with Castellanos, I'm worried first game of the year with when they play Alabama. They're going to be hell. I guarantee it.
Yeah, no doubt about it. But that's there's a lot of interesting things going into next year in terms of the hot seat in the SEC. Couple guys that are teetering there, as well, like we talked about. Brian Kelly. Levy could potentially be getting there as well, and then a couple guys who are literally on the plank.
And Lee could be a guy like Levy who's the next year too if Vandy reverts back, I think.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And again, like I said, depending on how this year ends and then next year, and really how Keon Russell plays out at Alabama, how hot will Kalen DeBoer get in the future as well?
Yeah, I'm interested too. Like, nobody's talking about it right now, and they shouldn't be. But Mike Elko, Aggies love Mike Elko. He doesn't have any issues with the fan base right now.
Right.
There was frustration as to how the year ended last year because of how much was on the table and how much was all A&M had to do was seize the opportunity, right? And they failed. And so
they lose 4 of their last 5. Is that right?
Their last 5. Yeah. So that was bad, right? But thank you, 2 minutes.
Yeah.
So I think fans were really frustrated with the way that last year ended. But the only thing I'll say here about it is A&M fans are not okay with 8 wins a year.
Yeah.
So if we go 8-4 again this year, the chatter will start. I promise you that.
I'll be curious to that notion, boss man. If they go 7 or 8 wins this year, Colin Klein probably gets fired, and Elko might have to do that to save face with the supporters. Yeah,
totally right. I think most of the frustration last year fell to the coordinators because I think Aggies have a lot of trust in Mike Elko just from his DC days there, as well as Duke
did phenomenal at Duke. I think he's a hell of a coach. I've always liked him a lot.
Right. So I think that there's a lot of trust there in the head man, but I think that mostly Aggies blame the coordinators for the issues last year, both on the defensive and the offensive side of the ball. And I think defensive, you won't really have that this year because Elko, I think, is going to be calling the defense. He stepped in and said he'll do that.
Yeah.
But on the offensive side of the ball, Colin Klein is definitely, on the hot seat, I would say. You go look at A&M message boards and everybody's like, put up or shut up this year,
Yeah. And they're one of the teams as much as I like Elko, I don't have a lot of faith in their QB situation right now. I don't know why. For me, I always liked Weigman. Couldn't stay healthy. I mean, I don't think he was healthy last year when he played, but I don't know how it's going to go this year. I mean, is Zeno, is Reed, who's going to be the guy? I
guess that's the question as Aggies fans, ain't it, this year, boss man?
It is, and I think he's got a lot around him, which is good. The offensive line is going to be the most experienced that A&M has had since that 2020 offensive line, which arguably
was unbelievable. Yeah, I mean,
it was incredible. Yeah, they
such a good run blocking team. Yeah,
they're best blocking team that A&M has had since I think 2012, right, when they had like Luke Jokel and Jake Matthews and those guys. So the line has been an issue at A&M for years. So this year they should have the best line, which will give Marcel Reed a lot of time. The issue with Marcel is that he knows he can use his feet and he's so good at running that he often will break pocket and when he doesn't need to. So if he can get that out of his system and they can teach him to, hey, stay in the pocket, right? He's going to have the wide receivers. They went into the portal and got the wide receivers. They're going to have
Concepcion and Hudson were massive pickups for them.
Huge pickups. Plus Mario Craver, right, who's a 4-star from Mississippi State. So
Nyblack, maybe he can,
Nyblack, right? Like there's weapons all over. The running backs, you're going to have Le'Veon Moss back. You're going to have Ruben Owens back. So there's talent everywhere. Yeah, exactly. As long as they can stay healthy, there's weapons everywhere. The one issue I think is that you're not going to have size at wide receiver. Keep an eye on that because Noah Thomas left in the portal for Georgia, and all those guys that they brought in are like 6'1" or under. So that's great. They can run routes. We got some guys who can, hit you on a quick slant, replace the blitzer kind of thing.
Maybe good if Reed's out of the pocket and you need to cut and create space. Yeah,
sure. But there isn't that guy, right, who you can throw it up to, who's a possession receiver, or who you can throw the fade route to once you get inside the 20. So that's where the issue is going to be at wide receiver. But, to your point, Mike, about the QB situation, Marcel Reed is extraordinarily talented. He's an extremely gifted athlete. So now we just want to see him put it together at quarterback, right, and start making reads. Start going through a progression. Can you get to your third read and then make a throw, right, instead of going 1, maybe 2, and then bolting to try to go get a first down? Because teams are going to key in on that, right? They're just going to spy him and say, you got to beat us with your arm. So
you guys kind of have a similar situation like a Jalen Milroe problem like Alabama has. Reed can use his legs and he's got a fairly decent arm. Jalen Milroe last year used his legs way too much and didn't really progress. And look at his progressions throughout the field. He sees one, if Ryan Williams was not open, he took off running and just backfired most of the year.
So, exactly. Yeah. So, and I think, A&M will run a lot of those concepts they did last year, like they did against LSU, right, where they were utilizing Reed's legs, using the zone read. And with Ruben Owens, right, you're going to have to account for both of those guys because both those guys can beat you to the edge and, break off a 60-yarder. So with Ruben Owens back, I think that will help the zone read, hopefully help open up some passing lanes for Marcel. But I think that, like you guys are talking about, Aggies fans are feeling the same thing. Like, hey, we just want to see it. We're a little bit shaky about how our quarterback situation is this year. And Marcel has the talent to be the guy, but can he put it together and progress and grow into that role?
Yeah.
I don't know. I was going to say, based on the guys Klein had at K-State, Reed fits that system. Like he seems to be a good fit for the type of offense we've seen out of Klein.
Yes. Yeah, and that was the interesting thing last year. Like I'm sad that it didn't work out with Weigman. I still love the kid. I really wanted him to have a statue, next to Johnny Manziel at Kyle Field.
Right.
When he came to A&M. He was just like, he fit A&M very well. And it was, super talented. He just was never healthy. I wish the kid the best at Houston. I hope he tears it up. But also to that, right? Like he didn't necessarily fit what Colin Klein wanted to do. You know, I think there were some rumors that Colin Klein actually wanted to start Marcel Reed from the jump and kind of got overruled by Elko, who said, no, man, you got to start the 5-star stud, you know, who has beaten LSU and, you know, has a lot of good tape. And so anyway, it'll be Colin Klein's show with Marcel Reed this year, who fits what he wants to do much better.
Slight tangent. I do think Houston will be one of the most improved P4 teams. Willie Fritz is a heck of a coach. They were bad in year one. I think they make a lot of strides this year in year two.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I can see that for sure.
Yep. Man, an hour went by real quick tonight. Well, guys, that's the show right there. We talked about, coaches on the hot seat, and that was a fun discussion, and we just got 3 guys tonight, but we still had a great time. Boss Man, Mike, thank you guys for jumping on tonight. Find us all on your social media. I'm at Jake Thomas TTS, Boss Man, Biscuits SEC, Mike, your Hughesman CFB. You can find us everywhere, honestly. Find us right here every Thursday night. Biscuits SEC on here Wednesday nights, correct?
Yep, Wednesday nights at 6 o'clock Central, 7 o'clock Eastern. So,
and Mike, you got some stuff in the works. I got some stuff in the works. So we're all about to be here for the long run, So 371 of you guys, thank you all for listening. 372 now. Thank you all for being here.
That one person just came and got their money's worth out of the show.
Exactly. Yeah. Go back to the beginning, rewatch the show, have a good laugh with us. And we'll be back here next Thursday night. I'm Jake Thomas with Boss Man, Mike Hughesman. Thank you all for joining. Thank you for listening. We'll be back here hopefully with a full squad next week. If not, if it's just us 3 again, we'll find something else and have a good time again. So
darn right.
Thank you all, guys. Roll Tide and good night.
Gig 'em. Thanks, guys.
Spurs up.